You're going to meet a fabulous landscape painter who lives in Taos, New Mexico. Welcome, Chris Morel. Welcome, Chris.
Welcome. Thank you so much, Eric. It's so good to see you and so good to be here.
Thank you for doing this today, and Happy New Year. First day back after the holidays. So how was your new, well, first off, what are you going to do today?
I am going to show you guys do a demo based on the St. Francis Church in Ranchos de Taos.
Okay.
And that famous old church that was immortalized by George O'Keeffe and Ansel Adams. The reason I picked this, a number of reasons. Number one, it was my very first location where I opened up my very first studio gallery in 1995, 94. And the church is just this monolithic, beautiful structure with planes that accept light and cast shadows, warm and cool and reflective. And so my objective is to show you the effects of light on surfaces like this and see if we can't explain, some of the properties of that as I execute this.
Excellent. Yeah. Good. Well, I'm looking forward to it. Now, what did you do for New Year's Eve?
This year, very, very low profile, of course. We just trying to stay healthy, which is not really that hard for an artist who's trapped up in the mountains. We go into town for supplies with a plastic bag over my head every once in a while.
All right. Well, Chris, we're going to have you right back in just a second. And thank you for doing this today and being the first one for the new year.
What I have done here is drawn out. I don't know if you can see some of these reference materials. They are pretty small, but the church, when I moved to Taos in 94, I opened a gallery studio right next to this church. So it has a lot of significance and to me in the beginning of my art journey in the Taos area. I had moved up from Austin.
Where is the church in Taos?
It is in Taos. It's technically in Ranchos de Taos, which is just South Taos. It's 3 miles south of the plaza in Taos. Okay. And so it's a very famous church. It was built about 200 years ago, and it's been immortalized by George O'Keeffe many times, Ansel Adams, a photographer, myself, and every other person that's ever driven by. Every other artist with a paint set has stopped and painted this church. So anyway, it means a lot to so many. The reason I chose it, though, was because of the strong light and shadow and the different aspects of how light is accepted on different planes, the intensity, the warm and cool shadow, cast shadows, reflected shadow. Also, in this particular subject, there had just been a storm, deep storm clouds passing through. And so it created this beautiful contrast behind that sunlit.
Oh, you get a dark next to that light. It's beautiful. Now, it looks like you're painting on a board.
What I've done is just taped a piece of linen onto just a masonite board, so I'd have some area here to tape up, the reference and things like that. And then I took a raw umber wash and put this on here to give this just a little bit of a undertone, so I could really, really accentuate these sunlit passages. So,
and is that raw umber dry?
Well, I hope so. I put it on a little while ago. Feels like it.
Yeah. Okay.
And if it isn't, it's too bad. We're going to do with it.
All right, go for it. All right. All right. What are you going to do first?
Well, one thing, a great friend and this painter who died, Ray Vanella, who was a great Taos painter, would always tell you was get your darkest dark and your lightest light, of course. And I know for all the painters out there, that is something traditionally that we look for in order to have
your hand is blocking where your hand is blocking where your brush was going. Okay. I know this is going to be tricky. Yeah.
This is going to be tricky. I'm doing over the shoulder now. So yeah. I have determined that this is probably the darkest dark in the painting is that shadow.
No, you're not painting with any medium. You're just doing straight out of the tube paint, right?
Straight out of the tube. No, I do wipe my brush with, paint thinner or, odorless mineral spirits or something like that, to keep it clean as I'm going through. A lot of times I don't change brushes as much as if I thought about it, I might. I just kind of wipe them dry, keep the paint out of them. And then I think our lightest light in this painting is, either going to be one of the clouds in the sky or an area right about there where that sun is hitting. You can see over here where it's hitting that curved part of that adobe structure. So if we have a guide, we have two poles, value poles, we're going to keep all of our values in between these two right there. So that's a little bit of a starting point. And then from there, I just want to start massing in some of these shapes. And let's see, I'm using this one particularly. And I've put out a pretty broad palette. And the reason for that, typically when I'm teaching people, I like to do a split primary palette, which is just primaries, a warm yellow, a cool yellow, a warm blue, a cool blue, warm red, and a cool red, and white. And then that's a way for me to really explain color principles, how to mix colors, how to influence them. In this case, since we have 45 minutes at the most, I've decided that we're just gonna open up the palette, so I have a lot of go-to colors for this. So
keep it simple, yeah.
Keep it simple and make it easier on me to at least get my point across. Eric, have you been to Taos?
I have been to Taos many times. I've been a guest of the Feshen family at the Feshen Museum. I've not been out to the ranch, but
yes.
But it is it's a very special place. I've been there probably 3 or 4 times now. I've been to the Pueblo in Taos and have met.
Yeah.
I met with the I guess the chief, and I was trying to get us permission to bring the plein air convention there. And the problem is that they will oftentimes just randomly declare something a holy day or a prayer day. And as a result, we couldn't be guaranteed that we could drive all the way to Taos and wouldn't be allowed in. So we've not been able to do it. And plus they wanted $250 per person to paint on the property. So when you got that many people, it just wasn't practical.
Yeah, it is unpredictable up there because they do have quite a bit of they have quite a few activities that are particular to their.
But they need to do that because they've had so many people take advantage of them, people making money off of them without them getting any value. So I totally get it.
Yeah, no, and there's some really super people. If you, of course, they won't do it this year, but every Christmas Eve they have that wonderful procession.
Yeah.
From the church, and they burn the bonfires and they shoot off the rifles. And last year, it was just magical. It was snowing, and the bonfires were just so intense. It was just an absolute beautiful, beautiful day.
Well, they might do it this year, 2021. We never know what will happen by the end of the year.
That's right. We've got a whole year to make things better. So to fix this thing, whatever this thing is. So what I'm doing here is I'm trying to, if you can see it, I'm trying to show the subtle differences between where sunlight is very direct. Sunlight is coming down directly on this, as opposed to a little less of an angle here. So that's going to be slightly darker, very slightly, but and as it turns out, a little warmer, it seems.
So in the Carlson book, Carlson talks about how your straight up and down planes are your darkest planes. In other words, the trunks of trees.
Exactly.
And But this is interesting. It's an interesting challenge because it's a straight up and down plane, but it's in a lot of light. But the curved planes are the second highest amount of light, and then the flat planes are the highest amount of light.
So, yes, and it's a very, very good theory. And as light changes, though, as the angle of the sun drops in the sky, as you'll notice, as you notice cottonwood trees late in the evening in the valleys, when that sun is coming in at a 45-degree angle, you can see through the trees and you can see their trunks light up. So it really has to do with the angle of the sun when you're actually painting. So
yeah, makes sense.
But yeah, and then typically that's when artists and photographers like to be out painting anyway, is when that light is not when it's hour. Exactly, not when it's just right overhead. So the area that I'm going into here is going to be a cast shadow. So this shadow should naturally be cooler because it is casting shadow. And as opposed to, and I'll show you here in a minute, as opposed to this area right next to it, which is in shadow, but it is receiving reflected, for the purposes of illustrating this, I might have to punch it up. Yeah, because I don't know how good you can read these subtle color and value changes in temperature and so forth.
Oh,
so basically what I'm saying, and for those of you, I know a lot of you know this, but I always like to hear it again just to reaffirm the fundamentals. This area is a cast shadow. It's cooler because the light's coming across and it is basically just blocking light from going there. This area is receiving reflected light from this sunlit surface, so it warms it up. It's also receiving light from here, so it warms it up. So every different angle, every turn accepts it accepts the light in a different way. And so
now, in looking at your photograph, that photographic shadow is a lot darker, it seems, and a lot bluer. And you're painting a building which is essentially kind of a brown sand color, right?
Yes. Yes.
So how do you determine the shadow? I mean, I guess you're just looking at it and trying to capture it as close as possible.
Well, that's a really good question because I'm never dead on with the color and the value, but
that's because you're not wearing value specs.
That's it. That's exactly right. And my eye doctor says that to me always. But I'll tell you how I find out where I am is, and I'm going to show you, or at least illustrate as quickly as I can here. What we have to do is eventually, once we start putting in these shapes, and this is going to be a sky shape, cloud shape, is comparatively. In other words, once I put this in here, I mixed a little orange, by the way, into this ultramarine blue because it wasn't a pure blue. It was kind of a gray blue, and it may even have some other color in there. But so once I put this color against the shape of this church, and then I will be able to tell much more accurately if I am in the right color, temperature, and value application.
Your hand a little bit again.
Oh yeah, sorry about that.
Well, I'll tell you, when you put that down, though, it really makes it pop, doesn't it?
Yes, it really is. It's amazing, and so I've always found that you can't really. That's why massing in big shapes when you do a painting, especially on location, since the sky is, or the light rather, is changing all the time. It's really important to get in your shapes as they are adjacent to one another. And that is the best way to find out whether your value and your color and all of those things are working. And that way, once you get that in and you're tweaking your drawing, even though I did a preliminary drawing here, it does not mean that I won't correct throughout, especially with architecture. Architecture is, especially on the spot, architecture, it takes a real diligent practice to learn and know how to see your perspective lines and how they apply to.
I'll tell you, and if they're off, you see it so quickly.
Absolutely. Isn't that something? It could
So
be
how do
the
you
most
deal with
beautiful.
that when you're on location? How do you deal with it?
Well,
How do you, especially a building like that?
I tell you, I think two things. If you want to get early morning light, then get out there earlier than the time you want to paint, and then concentrate a lot on your drawing, and then be willing to wipe it down, start over. And so give yourself the time to do that. But if you have enough time to work out all those perspective problems in advance, you're gonna be okay. Then you can launch yourself into the painting, and you can worry about the fun part, laying in the color, doing the values, and so forth.
One of the things that I'd love to understand, Chris, maybe you can help us with this, is that I find architecture especially hard to paint. And I don't know why. I don't know if it's because of the edges maybe being too sharp or something, but it's something about my architecture work that really stumbles. I'm sure you'd have to look at it to know, but what is the key to painting architecture other than perspective?
That's a good question. Other than practice, I think really finding an attractive angle, number one, really studying the time of day, morning or afternoon, is very important. And then basically, Eric, I would just have to say drawing. Continue to wherever, for instance, I don't do a lot of figures. And so if I were to sit down and want to start painting figures in my work, I would really have to go back to school. And so I think architecture with anything takes a lot of dedication and attention to the craft, and to understanding how lines come together, how to, avoid tangents, how to, create, a design. And, speaking of design, I think with plein air, I think for years I saw a lot of plein air painters, myself included, who would go out, and we were just so happy we got something done, or a couple things done. And after a number of years, I started to realize that there was a certain amount of design and composition being sacrificed for the sake of getting that work done. And so I think that it's important when you're painting on location to not worry about finishing that piece. If you really want to do a nice piece, spend time on your composition. Take photographs, come back the next day, whatever you think will work best for that piece.
I was reading an old book last night, and it's like from 100 years ago. And he said something in it I had never stopped to think about. He said, he didn't call it plein air painting. He said, when you're outdoors painting, your primary goal is to capture the color and the light. He said, don't worry about form. Don't worry about anything else. You can always go back and get that in, or get a sketch of it. But he said, the color and light is moving so fast, you've got to grab it fast.
Yeah, it's great to hear that. It's great to hear all the different approaches, because, and Eric, I'm sure painters like I do that actually take notes. And I've thought about doing that, but I've never done it. But I've seen these sketchbooks where they have ultramarine blue, and they'll have I dropped a headphone. They'll have an arrow pointed to these different areas, and I just think that's fantastic.
Yeah.
To be that much of a student.
Well, yeah. So what it forces you to do is it forces you to concentrate on drawing. And, you look at somebody like George Carlson who does that. He's got a number system. He knows the number corresponding with a particular color. And that way he's making it more about a painting that he doesn't even do a photograph. That way he's not copying a photograph.
Oh, I think that's so great. And he's just an all around art filled soul. That guy,
Oh, he's a gift.
I mean, I didn't even know he was a painter. I show at a gallery in Santa Fe that's got some of his work, and
Which one is
uh,
that?
it's Nidra Matucci in Santa
Yeah.
Fe. And
Yeah. Well, you got to be at the top of the heap if you're in that gallery.
oh, I just don't think they know much about me yet.
Oh yeah.
In 9 years, they haven't figured it out. So I got lucky there.
I think there's a little more than luck.
Well, I'll have to say the Matucci family is one of my unbelievably favorite groups of people. They are a relaxed, very, very mature group in the art business, and
They sure
talk
have
about it.
they sure have an
Yeah.
excellent reputation.
Oh, and they should. I mean, the way they run their business, the way they treat their artists, and the way they've treated me, and the quality. And here's something to say, and maybe I'll, hopefully they're watching. Is they never once ever even hinted at what we like about yours. Could you do more of that?
Yeah.
And I will say this to any artist, even though it's an easy trap to fall into. Be careful if you hear those words. We like your landscapes, but we really like your whatever. Be careful with that, because what you're going to paint that is in your heart, what you want to paint, what you want to wake up and paint every day is what is going to be ultimately your best work.
You have to you have to reflect your soul and what your interest is. Now, if they're saying paint more little red barns and it just happens to be you love painting little red barns, that's a different story. But
you're absolutely right. And I love painting red barns. I grew up in Maryland, and so going back to the East Coast just recently up in the Berkshires, I've had the opportunity to paint, those old dairy farms and all those beautiful, beautiful structures that are so near and dear to my heart, and the reason why I got into the art business in the first place. So anyway, yes, I think that's also, Eric, makes sense to align yourself with a gallery who would represent, the work that you like to do, and you'd be a good fit. That really is what it comes down to.
yeah. So let me ask you about, when you're creating a sense of light and you're using white is obviously your brightest color on your palette, but it cools things down. So how do you deal with that? Do you always make sure to add a little warmth into that light?
Just about all the time. I cannot say that I can. Very, very seldom have I ever laid just pure white out of the tube. It just doesn't. It's just cool, and it's such a dead color. So
Yeah,
yes,
but what I mean is like you're doing the walls on the that are in light. You're adding a lot of white to lighten that up, but you've got to have something that's going to say warm light. So you're adding some form of yellow into that white no matter what. Is that correct?
absolutely. Yes, that's it. You're whatever the temperature shift that you're looking for, warm in this case, with the example we're talking about. Then you reach for your warm colors on your palette, your oranges, your reds, your yellows, to influence in that direction. And the adverse is the same if you're going for, well, you can't get any cooler than white, but you can certainly keep a mixture with white cool by adding more blues and things like that. So it's a really good it's a really good technique, I think, to work with a limited palette when you can, just for the purposes of really learning how to understand how to bend color and how to create color. It's really good. It's just a really good tool for teaching, I believe, or it is for me. Everybody's different, but I think it teaches, like, if you have students that are trying to learn and they've got too many tube colors and they don't have any harmony, then you take them back to the basics. And you could take them all the way back to, red, yellow, blue, and then some white. But to have a warm and cool aspect of both of your primaries, and then you can really learn how to mix, especially like greens. You know how we all struggle with greens, or at least I do. You learn how to mix warm greens, cool greens. Painting the forest in the summer, for instance. It's just a patchwork of all of these different temperatures and shapes and things like that.
Yeah.
I don't know how this is looking on your end.
Looks good, except for when your hand blocks it.
I'm sorry.
No, that's right.
If I could go, if you can see this, I'd go over the side.
Yeah, I know. It's hard. It's not easy to do it.
Well, I could probably get. I was watching one of your demos with what was his name, Michael, the watercolorist.
Yeah, Michael Holter, probably.
Michael, really great demo. He was painting some boats, and he had his watercolor flat, which is typical, and he had a really nice rig. I thought the way things were set up, you could see he had a camera directly over, shooting straight down.
Yeah.
In this case,
well, in watercolor, watercolor runs, and so a lot of people don't like to put it up. Well, the other thing I want to point out to everybody that you're doing, whether it's intentional or not, is you're focusing on big shapes.
Yes.
You're not focusing on a bunch of leaves. You're focusing on, looks like 5 or 6 really, really big shapes, maybe 10.
Yes, and I wanted something that we could pull off in a short period of time and at least get some basics down. I wouldn't finish something this quickly, but
of course,
it's a good way to, well, you know what though, Eric, there's a lot of my friends that they just are amazing how quickly, and also I've seen people do very large pieces with that type of, and that fascinates me.
Yeah,
really
well, I remember a guy came up to me. I was painting in British Columbia and Banff, and this guy comes up to me and he said, "Are you? Is that painting for sale?" And I always say, "Well, everything is for sale at some point. I do like to keep these, but." And he said, "Well, how much time did that take you?" And I thought, okay,
here we go.
Calculate how much time, based on his hourly rate, how many hours. And so, it's the old classic argument. Well, it's, 2 hours and 20 years.
Yeah, I love that.
You get these painters that can knock it out in 2 hours. It's 20 or 30 or 40 or 50 years experience.
Yeah, I love that. I love that comparison. It's kind of like, oh, well, they do the math and they go, oh my gosh, you're making as much as a high-powered attorney here. You're only worked on that for 3 hours and that's what you get for it. So yeah, I've heard that, but in many cases, honestly, I have had the opportunity to meet some collectors, right off the easel, so to speak. But for the most part, I dance around that a little bit. Is that for sale, and how much do you get for it? That question is, I think about it before I answer it.
It's hard. I think you almost have to go out knowing exactly what your answer is going to be, and knowing you're going to get asked the question, and how are you going to answer it if you get asked. I usually just say, if I were selling this in the gallery, I'd be getting $2,400 for it, and that usually shuts them up right away.
And they tell you oh, well, then get off my land.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
You
I
owe
haven't
me
had that.
money now.
I haven't had that one. Yeah.
Yeah, no, but the thing about painting outside that's been so wonderful for me is the incredible people that I've met, the ranchers, the history that I've learned talking to these in northern New Mexico, the history of these old small ranches and these little adobe villages. And usually
I just had that. I think you're right. I was just talking to the guy that owned the old log cabin, and he's telling me how his grandfather and his great grandfather's brother built it in 1930, and it's fabulous to be able to find that out. I've driven by it 100 times, never stopped and talked to the owner.
I know it. You learn, yeah, and you meet the needy people, and then in many cases, you get an invitation to the world can open up to you right there.
Yeah.
If you have a nice conversation, I've found a lot of people want to show you more.
Yeah.
They'll say, "Do you have time? I want to show you the back part of this ranch."
Yeah. Yeah, I've had people invite me into their house and feed me and show me their paintings and everything. It's fun.
Well, not to glamorize ourselves too much, but we do provide something very positive to society, and we're totally non-threatening. I think when we're standing on the other side of their fence and making all these funny shapes with our hands, to see if we've got a composition, they might look at you like, I've had people say, what are you doing?
Yeah.
And then it's like, oh yeah, well, I was going to paint this. I'm a painter. And yeah, it's very funny. Very funny.
Well, I've had people say, what do you mean you're a painter? You're like a house painter?
Right. Yeah, but with this brush, and I charge this much by the hour, it's going to cost you.
Yeah. So we're down to about the last 10 minutes. So you're doing
really?
great progress. I'm just making you yap.
I have I prefer to yap when I'm doing this, and if there's any information through yapping that I can impart, then that's what it's all about.
Yeah.
So anyway, back to yapping about this stuff. These are, like you had mentioned, Eric, these are the major shapes of this of these structures right here. And at this point, and if I were outside painting at this point, I would say I'd lean back and say, I think I've got, the workings of a decent composition here. I think drawing's okay. Now I can kind of slow down a little bit. I don't have to chase the light because I've already established my shadows.
Right.
I've already established, my light and dark areas. Now you're using your memory because the light will have changed. It changes every second. So I do
try
like to
try not to block with your hand now.
I'm sorry, Eric.
No, you're not doing it yet, but I just wanted to remind you because it's going to be the that detail.
Yeah, we had a gallery right next to this church. It was really fantastic.
Yeah, a lot of people go in and say they love it. They want paintings of the church, right?
Well, it was funny. Yeah, I think they did. It was 3 years before I painted my first church painting down there. How strange, because so many other people were painting it, but I just didn't see it.
Yeah, it wasn't for you.
I didn't see it the way I wanted to see it. And then all of a sudden I did, and the whole world of this church and how to, let me get a little different brush here.
All right.
And how to render it finally caught me. It was a certain time of day, there's so many different aspects of it. Like when it snows and you've got these unbelievable, big, thick, billowing, piles on the tops of all these adobe turns, and then the sunlight. It was just a phenomenal structure. And then, of course, this is the back. The front is equally as beautiful with the spires and the bell tower. And
I want to point out, just so when you went down that edge, you intentionally stopped and moved your brush in a little bit. You intentionally did not make that edge straight.
Yeah, there's nothing straight in Taos, New Mexico.
And I wanted to point that out because I think that's one of the things that really makes an architecture painting stand out, is you're not focusing on trying to make all these edges perfectly straight.
Yes, yeah, and
less interesting that way.
That's right. It's more interesting, and there's not one plumb or straight line in Taos County. There really isn't.
Blocking again.
Oh, blocking. Sorry. You need to come up again. Next time you come up, you gotta let me know and grab me, and we'll take you out to some of these really super, super cool high road. You heard the high road, right?
Yeah. Yep. I love the high road.
Wonderful, wonderful. Old churches like Las Trampas, which is on the high road as you're heading up from Santa Fe. It's halfway between there and Taos, basically. And it's
just don't want to get stuck on the high road if it decides it's going to snow.
Yeah. They really do keep the roads in pretty good shape up here, because these are the only roads, the mountains make it pretty. Oh man, I tell you what, how close are we?
You got about 4 minutes.
Oh, right. What should we go for? Let's add a little more dark.
You're painting.
Let's go for a little more dark here. And then let me hit a couple highlights just to bring this thing partially alive. Something right there, something, the top of this is going to pick up a little extra light. It wouldn't be as blocking, right? I'm noticing something from the photograph where this is the light right here, where there's that slight turn down this way is capturing, and it's cooling off. It's brighter, but it's cooler than what is happening in the rest of that form. It just, this form, this one in this case just undulates all the way.
Yeah. Just adding that those little touches of light have given it so much more form.
Yeah, it really does. And it's all about the observation of it, and really just being true to the theory of light and why light does what it does. If light is in a shadow, there's a reason why it is reacting a certain way. If it's in the sunlight, if a shape is in the sunlight, then you're going to get not only the sun on that shape, but that light that it's catching is also going to influence something around it. It's either going to cast a shadow, or it's going to cast warm light into the shape that it's next to and influence that in that way.
Yeah. Well, this has been a fabulous experience, Chris. I'm going to ask you to put the brush down, because come back on camera, then we can wrap up real quickly.
Sure. Let me get this camera. How are we?
We are great.
Good.
You did it. You knocked out a beauty in a very short period of time. Congratulations.
Oh, there's so many adjustments that need to be made with that. I'm just looking at it now going, wow, that's That's a project, but
Let us see, since you're handheld, let us see your studio real quickly. I know it's probably a mess, but
of course it's a mess. Yeah, this is. You can see outside. I have a beautiful view to the west.
oh my goodness. Wow.
Yes,
Life is
and
tough.
life is pretty good. And so this is obviously the studio salon style. I built this with a friend of mine. We had a tremendous time. Can I mention that I do a workshop in September here in the Taos area?
Of course you can. Matter of fact, I'll put your website up, and it's morelart.com, and anybody can go. And yeah, I'm sure everybody by September will want to get out.
Yes, and I think everything should be okay. Plus, we'll be outside. These are some of the pieces from New England.
Yeah.
And so anyway, and then also I think we're going to be in one of the January Plain Air Today newsletters, and we're going to be featured. I'm going to be featured talking about my experience setting up a part-time studio in the Berkshires.
Oh, cool. All right.
Yeah, so that might be something that people might enjoy seeing.
Well, if you get up there in the summertime, let me know. And I'm about 3-4 hours from you there, so maybe we'll figure out how to meet halfway.
I was up that way. I was up around Lake George. You might be up there. I don't know where you are, but
I'm a little further away. But I'm an hour and a half from Lake George. Anyway, this has been fabulous, Chris. Thank you so much. Thumbs up and applause for Chris Morel.